Greetings, everyone. Greetings and salutations. Actually, I just was watching Heathers recently for the 700th time. I love that movie. And Christian Slater, when he meets Winona at the beginning, says, "Greetings and salutations." And so, greetings and salutations, and welcome to another episode of Living on Music. I'm Steve Hauk. And I'm telling you, during the last 2.5 years, across the board, from the DC area all the way around the world, interviewing people of all shapes and sizes, and genres and things like that. I've also been able to interview some legendary drummers. We have some amazing ones in the DC area, and I've interviewed a number of those. Andy Hamburger, Chuck Sullivan, you can go on, Eric Selby, Daniel Schwartz, on and on with the drummers we've had on Living on Music. But I've also had Carmine Appice, who was the drummer for Rod Stewart. He was the original drummer at the beginning of all through Vanilla Fudge, and they were groundbreakers. And he kind of showed his style by increasing his drum number of drums, his drum set, and has influenced Phil Collins, Neil Peart, John Bonham, and other people. So I had Carmine on. Also had Jim McCarty on, who's the Yardbirds original drummer, and there are going to be some quick clips coming out from both of these guys. McCarty talking about Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck, and Jimmy Page in front of him, growing as new guitarists. Anyway, I've had those legendary guys on, and my guest on this episode of Living on Music is no exception. If you look behind me, 500,000 people descended on this 600-acre farm in the midst of a hot, rainy, muddy August, 3 days in August of 1969. And one of the headliners was a band called Canned Heat. And Canned Heat not only did a wonderful job performing in a very kind of hectic, some places empty types of equipment, trying to get their act together. And you'll hear some of the stories from this man about Canned Heat's experience there. And they're amazing stories, two of them. Especially, but they headlined on the second day, and the music that they played is one of the highlights of the main film of Woodstock, but also the documentary that came out. Not just the performance. Canned Heat's Going Up the Country was really a theme song of that show, and it shows how they were part of the way and the influence of not only musical influence but culture. And an incredible experience to be able to play that concert. And that was only 2 years after my guest joined Canned Heat in 1967. His name is Fito de la Parra, and it is going to be an amazing ride. He has had a 55-year journey with Canned Heat. They're still playing now. They just played locally around here at the Ram's Head. They'll be back here again sometime, and I'm going to go see them. I couldn't go to that last show. And there's going to be just a legacy that this man, that Fito, has done to keep Canned Heat going since that time. And it was Going Up the Country and On the Road Again that vaulted them into the stratosphere of blues rock, one of the first bands ever to begin blues music and then cross over into kind of a rock and pop mainstream. And those two songs, those two classic hits, really propelled them. And we'll talk a lot about what it was like to be behind the drums and in the studio and part of those two songs, like Fito was. Also, their lineup. He is the only surviving member of the band. Bob Haidt, Al Wilson, and Larry Taylor and Henry Vestine were all the original members with him. And he's the only one left, and he has kept the band going for many years, different lineups. They've played all around the world, kept the legacy going for such a legendary band. And now, today, if you were going to sit there and watch Canned Heat right here in front of you, you'd have Dale Spalding on harmonica, who's a fabulous longtime player, Rick Reed, who's had stints with Paul Butterfield, John Mayall, the Chicago Blues Reunion. So there you go. There's a blues heart of this blues band, which is their heart, really. And the newest addition, lead guitar and vocals, you've heard of his name, Jimmy Vivino. We'll talk about Jimmy. He's best known for being a 28-year association with Conan O'Brien on the Conan O'Brien, Late Night with Conan O'Brien. And really, that was a huge moment for Jimmy. And now he's part of Canned Heat. This is a band, again, that was one of the first blues bands ever really to start making it and vaulted into the next level by adapting different kinds of sounds of music in pop, jazz, raga, psychedelia, even some Indian beginnings, as you'll hear, which you remember in On the Road Again. It's and we'll talk about that. But ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's give a huge, warm, Living On music welcome to Adolfo, a formal name, but he's been known as Fito his entire life, Fito de la Parra. Fito de la Parra, so wonderful to have you on Living On Music, sir. Welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's always nice. And I really love the picture you have behind you.
Well, yes. And there is a history of yours that goes very deep. In fact, I've been looking at that footage for weeks when I knew I was going to talk to you and absorbing your presence on stage as well as the band. And we're going to go down that road for sure about Canned Heat and things like that. I want to talk a little bit now, after welcoming you here, how you have been doing over the last couple of years, where live bands that are either new or legendary, like Canned Heat, are still playing. How have you been dealing with the pandemic part of being a musician at your stage in your career? And now that we're coming out, that's pretty darn good.
Well, as you must know, the last 2.5 years were very difficult,
Yes.
and there was no work. And we were all worried, and a lot of people were getting sick and dying.
Right.
And I guess the entertainment industry in general, not just the music industry, but the film industry, the theaters, all that, the live music, it was really a very difficult situation for all of us.
Yes.
Luckily, I invested in real estate during the good times, thanks to my father's advice.
Wow.
I listened to my father. Not always, but this time I did listen to him. He saved some of my money while we were doing really good in the 60s. And then finally, one of the times that I asked for my money back, because he was reinvesting it for me,
right,
he tells me, "You are not going to get your money if you're going to go buy a new car or do something stupid like that."
Wow.
He says, "But I'll send you your money if you promise me that you will invest in real estate."
Oh.
He says, "Because the music business," those were his words. He says, "The music business is a cruel business.
Right.
And you have to be careful for anything that can happen."
For sure.
And, he was right. There were times when the disco thing came on and nobody wanted to listen to live hippie blues bands and stuff like that.
Exactly.
And that's when my father's advice worked out for me. And I mentioned that again because you asked me how did we do during these 2.5 years that we were not working.
Right.
A lot of my colleagues were doing real bad. And, we were collecting some unemployment.
Right.
But it was not enough. So thank God and thanks for my father's advice. I have a few properties here that I can survive with. I get my rents.
Right.
So I really don't depend on my musical career to survive. But of course, I still love playing, and I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it because I love playing music.
Well, and bringing your not only what you're doing now and being there, bringing the legend of Canned Heat out there to people who appreciate what you brought, which we'll talk about the whole evolution of the music with them and with you right now. Fito, I see a pretty nice list of gigs. It's like every night for the next week, including the Ram's Head on stage, which you have played when this airs. But we're going to give away tickets to that this week, and that's going to be exciting to let people know about it. But you're playing some wonderful gigs. It must feel great as a live performer for many years to be back out playing.
Yeah, especially after the 2.5 years that we were not able to tour, we were not able to play, we're not able to even go to a restaurant. I mean, it was it was a tough time to be alive and dealing with it. But now we're getting a lot of gigs, we're getting some offers. Of course, we're not young like we used to be, and it's not as easy for us to make long tours.
Right.
But we are doing this back east tour, and we're very happy that all those places are doing well. The sales have to be are okay, and I'm also very enthusiastic about introducing and playing with the current lineup.
Yes.
Which is kind of a new lineup, and we're doing really good with that, and we're getting great reviews.
Well, let me know, Fito. Talk a little bit about who is currently playing with you right now. I know the amazing group that you've had. Who is in there right now?
Okay, yeah. Well, our latest addition was Jimmy Vivino.
Yes,
you may know who he is.
I sure did.
Vivino is quite famous in the East Coast.
Yes.
And he used to be the band leader for the Conan O'Brien show for about 10 years.
Yes.
You know, the funny guy with the hat that plays great guitar and is very energetic and all that. So he, he wanted to join the Canned Heat. He likes the Canned Heat music and the Canned Heat attitude. And I'm very happy to have him. You know, I have Jimmy singing and playing lead guitar.
Yes.
Then I have Dale Spalding, who's been our front for about 15 years. That almost makes him an original member, you know, after being 15 years in the band with us.
Yes.
And also Rick Reed, who has great credentials. You know, he's played just with about anybody in the blues thing. You know, we lost Larry Taylor, our original bass player, about 3 years ago.
I heard about that.
And Larry himself recommended Rick when he was sick and he knew he was go, you know. So we hired Rick Reed, and the band is, as I said earlier, is sounding very good. We have a good, enthusiastic attitude, and we're looking forward for this next tour back east.
Well, I bet you are, Fito. And what I'm going to show first, we're going to be showing a few of the older clips of Canned Heat in a little while. I want people to see you and the band pretty much right now. There's a wonderful clip from the Maui Sugar Mill, and this was in October, about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago. And it's all of who you mentioned. It's you on drums, Jimmy on guitar, Dale. You got Rick. And this is you, everybody watching. This is a wonderful moment to show the blues core of Canned Heat all the way up to today. And we'll be talking with Fito about a lot of the blues influences and some of the collaborations. Here we go with a little bit of Cadillac Zack.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, you know, Fito, that shows where you've brought, and again, it's what you have been able to do to continue the legacy of Canned Heat through the years and create it. And it's been through hell and high water, and we'll talk a little bit of some of that. But for the most part, you've brought it up to a level. I mean, that blues song Cadillac Zack and the beginning guitar solo at the front of it, it must feel really good to have a band like that right now.
Yeah, that gig that you were talking about, the Cadillac Sack gig in Maui's sugar mill, that's probably one of the first gigs we played with Jimmy. That's a little bit over a year ago.
Wow.
So it was the very beginning. It was the freshness of the band. It was very fresh, and it's still very fresh right now, you know. So as I said, we're doing real good, and we're enjoying the music a lot, you know, and that's the main thing. That's really what matters.
It really does. You know, I wanted to talk a little bit about your musical life, which is what we do on Living on Music, a little past, a little present, and a little future. And, you know, born in February of in Mexico City of 1946, you had musical influences from the beginning coming right into the world. And was that family? How did it begin, the musical head of Fito, of Adolfo, I would think, because that's
I was Fito even then.
Oh, okay.
Adolfito. In Latin America, you call Fito anybody that is called Adolfo or Rodolfo. Those are the two names that become Fito. It's just like Dick and Richard, you know.
Exactly. Dick and Richard, exactly.
But like a small nickname. Anyway, so you know, I started my musical career actually when I was 13 years old.
Right.
Quite early.
Right.
And I had my first recording contract at that age too, which was amazing. We were before that, when I was about 10 years old, my dad used to take me to hear and see all these great movies made in the 50s about the swing era. My father really loved American culture and American music especially. He was like really nuts about it. And he used to take me to watch all these great movies when I was a kid.
Right.
And so, you know, I was watching the Glenn Miller story, the Benny Goodman story, the Gene Krupa story.
Right.
You know, they were great movies. And then eventually in the late 50s, I guess early 60s, Bill Haley and the Comets came to Mexico City.
Wow.
And my dad, of course, you know, being the music freak that he was, a music lover, he grabbed the whole family and says, "We're gonna go watch Bill Haley.
We're gonna go rock around the clock for the evening, right?"
I know. I mean, that was amazing. That was fantastic. For the first time in my life. I mean, I've heard Benny Goodman and I've heard Glenn Miller and all that stuff that my father showed me earlier, but I've never heard rock and roll before. I mean, this was like a complete new thing coming from the US, you know. So that's the thing that totally got me into playing music.
Right. And let me ask one thing, Fito. I got a little note which I thought was interesting. You were in a gang. Around 12 years old?
Really.
Was that a band gang?
Not really.
Or was it an interesting, what was that?
No, I wasn't really in a gang, but you know, I grew up in a large city, and of course there were gangs in the area.
Sure.
And each colonia, each area of the city had a gang.
Right.
No, actually, I was not part of the gang, but I knew some of them because I play music.
That's what I thought. I thought there was a musical connection. It was Los Sparks, I guess was the name, and that is wonderful.
Los Sparks, yes.
But they didn't do anything. They didn't do anything bad to you. I would hope.
No. They actually liked us. But you see, one of the reasons why my dad turned me on to music was that he wanted to keep me out of the gangs.
Oh,
and
spectacular!
Out of that kind of life.
Wow. Well, you began about 14 or between 14 and 15, I guess, playing drums. What was the drums what was the drums impetus that propelled you into playing drums of all the instruments?
Well, my first drum kit was actually a bunch of cookie boxes and
perfect
and tins. That's why when I was a little kid, just having fun beating things. Later on, I had a military drum, a military snare drum.
Oh my gosh!
And that was my first snare drum, one of the old military snare drums from the school. You know, I used to have it from the school, and my first cymbal was one of those ashtrays they used to make in the 50s, metal ashtrays with color, you know, all these colors and all this. Art Deco stuff from the 50s, you know.
Right. Perfect.
So I used to have one of those metal ashtrays, and I used that as a symbol. So,
Right.
that was very primitive. And yeah, I was just having fun. I didn't have any lessons or anything. And eventually I got my first drum kit, my first Slingerland kit,
Right.
as I joined more bands and I started
Yes.
making money on it.
So you were self-taught.
Self-taught, pretty much, yeah. I used to watch. Of course,
Beautiful.
I watched Bill Haley's drummer many times, and I used to listen to him, and I started educating myself, of course, with the jazz thing and the swing thing, starting to listen to some of Gene Krupa, of course, and Buddy
Sure.
Rich and Art Blake,
Yes.
Max Roach, all
Right.
the greatest jazz drummers. I've always liked listening to them, and whenever possible, see films about them, etc. But I
Yes.
never really took a formal musical lesson. I had one lesson that was kind of funny from a guy that we used to call vitamins, because he
Oh.
was a really skinny guy. So they call him Vitamins. He was an excellent drummer, and I asked him once, teach me about music. And he didn't really want to be bothered with this kid bothering him, so he grabs a newspaper and cuts them in two and tells me these are two halves.
Oh.
Then grabs the two halves, cuts them again, and tells me these are 4/4. And then he cuts them again and says these are 8/8.
Oh
Says
my
that's all you
God.
need to know about music. He says, understand what this is, what a whole is, and an eighth note is, and a quarter note is. He says, now don't bother me anymore.
Oh.
That was my first and only formal musical lesson from Vitaminas.
Oh, that is spectacular. What a lesson. Yeah, that's one of the most unique drum lessons I've ever heard of. That is spectacular.
It made sense. It made sense, and
Yeah.
I caught the mathematics of music, because music is architecture.
Yes. Absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
what the famous German philosopher Goethe said.
Right.
Said
Right.
music is architecture.
I love that statement, Fito, because my father was an architect and a music lover and got me into music as a young man in the 60s. And
There you go. So music is architecture. It's the same thing.
it builds, and it started to build you with bands like Los Juniors, Los Sinners, Los Hooligans. And I love this Javier Batiz, who was really Carlos Santana's mentor, guitar player. He is my favorite guitarist of my life, and I love him many, but I love Carlos. How did you join with these folks as you were still quite young growing in?
Yeah, I was playing basically pop music, and we were copying top 40 from the US in Mexico. We were translating about a lot of the famous songs on the top 40, translating to Spanish and re-recording them.
Right.
And some of our versions are actually quite good. Some of them are not as good. Some of them are even better.
Right.
You never know in music,
Right.
So that's when Javier Batiz arrived in Mexico City about in the early 60s, maybe mid 60s.
Yes.
And he came, he grew up in Tijuana, where they had a lot of exposure to rhythm and blues and all the radio stations and all that.
Right.
XCRB from Wolfman Jack. Wolfman Jack was actually a Mexican. So we were able to listen to that, and he played mostly rhythm and blues. So Javier came, and he was playing like B.B. King. He was playing all this straight guitar with stretching the notes, and he was playing the blues. And we were really not aware of that side of music yet, because it was still very segregated. There was like a lot of in the US, there was a lot of white stations playing white music,
yes,
and not as many black members. The integration of music and the blues and the black artists and all that came a little bit later, in the mid 60s and late 60s.
Sure.
So Javier came, and he started playing all that music and teaching us about it. So we became good friends, and I used to hang around his house, listening to John Lee Hooker records and Jimmy Reed, and just getting an education on it. And that's when the light came on my head, and I said, I have to go to the US and play black music and learn more about it.
Oh, you did. So you had that dream, and boy, did you execute the dream at the Tomcat Club, which sounds like that was where it began, your integration with people like T-Bone Walker, Etta James, Mary Wells. That must have been a way to continue the impetus for your love of blues, right? When you came back.
Yeah, that was great. It was a wonderful thing for me, a great privilege that recently arrived. I joined a band with a Texan, a couple of guys from Tennessee, and two Mexicans. It was like amazing band. It was a really good little band with a saxophone player, Dewey Dorrock, who is still active.
Oh.
And we play in this club that was, again, integrated. It was half the audience was black, half the audience was white.
Right.
Etta James used to live a few blocks from the Tomcat Club, and she used to come quite often and just visit, have a drink, listen to us.
Sure.
Sometimes she would sing. It was just wonderful to get to meet her and many other of the great artists. The Tomcat Club had a thing on the weekends called Celebrity Night. So every weekend they brought those different rhythm and blues celebrities that I was privileged to play with and made friends with, including T-Bone Walker and Jimmy Reed and the Shirelles, the Platters, Mary Wells, many others, and it was great. And that's where the managers of Canned Heat came to see me play.
That's what I was going to say. It was the Bluesberries Jam, right? That was, and they were.
Yeah, that was one of the bands. Yes, and that was one of the bands that I was playing with. I was playing at 3 bands at the same time.
Oh wow!
You have to understand that this situation in the mid '60s in Los Angeles, there was so much music, and so much stuff going on. It was like a explosion starting.
Right.
Very different than now time.
Right, and Skip Taylor was the one who said, "I want Canned Heat and your band to mesh to see you play."
That's right. He booked a gig in a place called the Magic Mushroom. Right. It was like a real nice little hippie place,
Wow.
The Magic Mushroom, and he booked it. He booked the Bluesberry Jam and the Canned Heat so they could see me play.
Right.
They were having problems with their drummer because their drummer was more a jazz-oriented guy, and he was not really that much into the blues.
Right.
And I was into the blues. So that was the main thing for me. I wanted to play that kind of music.
Right.
So we did, they came to see me at the Tomcat Club, and we filed for an audition, and we did the gig with the Bluesberry Jam.
Right.
And that particular night, I guess the Bluesberry Jam was better than Canned Heat.
Oh, that's
I gotta say, they were arguing with their drummer. And they were also just recently out of that famous bust in Denver.
Right. So not good moments.
They were not doing good. They were arguing. They were not in the best shape.
No.
And I had a great band. Bluesberry Jam was a great band, which eventually part of it became Pacific Gas and Electric.
Yes, that's right. And did Frank Cook leave Canned Heat and go to that band?
And Frank Cook, amazingly too, what a strange coincidence that Frank Cook leaves Canned Heat and then ends up in Pacific Gas and Electric.
Oh my
which
God!
It was, some of them were part of the Bluesberry Jam, and that's the way life goes. That's how it is.
That is a wild, interesting swap. But you said to Skip, what you said at that time was, "I was born to play with Canned Heat," and you knew it from the beginning. It seemed like you had a mesh right from the start, Fito.
That's right. That day that I said that famous quote is because, you see, musicians by nature, we have to be sort of mercenaries.
Yeah.
If you offer a musician a gig, the first thing you get is, how much am I going to make? How much are you guys making? I didn't want to say that or ask that question because I knew the Canned Heat was not a famous band. Was a blues band,
right.
It was, I never even expected them to become famous,
right?
But I love the music they were playing, and I saw them playing live a couple of times already, and I was really, I love the kind of music they were playing and the way they were approaching the blues music.
Right.
So that's why when they asked me if I wanted to join, I said I was born to play with Canned Heat. I wanted to show commitment. I wanted to show that I was going to be there for the long run, and I guess I proved myself after 53 years.
Yeah, you think? Yeah, I was born to play.
Amazing. It's amazing. I know it's amazing. When I met Sonny Freeman, the B.B. King's drummer.
Right. Oh.
He comes to me, and I admire him. Of course, he's one of the greatest blues drummers. And he comes to me and says, he says, this week I'm going to be playing with B.B. King for 30 years.
Oh.
And I was, wow, my God, the guy's been playing with B.B. King for 30 years. And then all of a sudden, now I think back, and I said, I've been with Canned Heat for 53 years. I guess I beat Sonny Freeman by 20 years now.
Yeah. I mean, again, the people I've had on here and known and interviewed some of the great drummers in the world, and I'm like, Fito's got everybody licked with this legacy, and the legacy, you jumped in and things seemed to kick in, Fito, pretty wonderfully with Canned Heat and you playing. What, your first gig was with the Doors as a double bill, wasn't it?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we play in October of '67. We were opening for the Doors.
That's not a bad opening gig to get in the late 60s with those guys.
That was great, but you have to keep in mind too, the Doors were not that famous either.
Yeah, right.
They were just starting. The two bands that represented the Los Angeles scene, were just starting. We're just starting to come up.
Right, exactly. And around that time, around 68, I love the story, and there's a story that was talked about where you took a cab with Al Wilson, Bob Haidt, and the cab driver was Albert Luandro. I mean, and that whole kind of, it just almost made the blues kind of continue to mesh into your brains. I love that. And you continued to do that. You recorded your second record, right? Their second record, Boogie with Canned Heat. And then you've been on what? I think
Boogie with
16 records from 68 to 2007. Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, that's right. And that Boogie with Canned Heat features Sonny Land Slim, who is the person you just mentioned that we found in the taxi drive.
That's
the taxi cab.
That's what I thought.
We couldn't believe it. We see his picture and his name on the little fare, the meter.
Right.
And we said, wow, look who's driving us. My God, it's Sonny Land Slim.
Oh my.
And then we just said, we shook hands. We told him we admire you. Of course, Bob Haidt, Henry Vestine, and Alan were musicologists, and they were record collectors. They had all kinds of records of him.
Oh.
And that's when we met him, and we asked him to play with us on that Turpentine Moan song.
Oh, that is spectacular. During that time, Fito, around that, between this time and we'll get to Woodstock in a moment, but there were two songs that I believe you were in the studio behind the drums for both, and they are two of the more legendary songs in rock and roll history, folk blues, rock and roll, more blues. It's Going Up the Country and On the Road Again. Now you have On the Road is really blues. Going Up the Country is almost more of a folk blues. How did those songs develop in your mind as you were sitting behind the drums and they began to be brought into the studio?
Well, On the Road Again is basically a traditional Mississippi country blues.
Totally.
And of course the publishers, I guess is on the name of I don't remember, Floyd Jones. Yeah, Floyd Jones and Alan Wilson. But that's what they say in the publishers. But if you really look at it and the history of On the Road Again and the lyrics,
yes,
it is traditional Mississippi music, and you cannot really tell who came up with those lyrics first.
Right.
It's very difficult. Of course, Floyd Jones is the first one that was recording those lyrics.
Okay.
But they come, is way back, and you'll never know where it comes, It's like almost like La Cucaracha in Mexico.
Right.
You know what I mean? La Cucaracha, La Cucaracha.
Yeah.
Nobody really knows who.
Right.
I know, that's it. That is something that nobody really knows who wrote it, but it's a traditional song that goes back with history.
Sure.
Sometimes
Sure.
there is more here than music. You know, there is history involved in music.
Right.
So that's what On the Road Again came, and the idea of adding Indian instrument in the background. We put a tambora there.
Yeah.
For the drone. That
right.
It was from the Indian influence in the mid 60s. There was a lot of Indian music influence all over the place. So we decided to add that to On the Road Again to keep that drone feeling, that hypnotic drone feeling, which is also basic of the John Lee Hooker influence and the one chord boogie stuff. And there you go. The combination of that John Lee Hooker influence and the Indian influence and the traditional lyrics. That's where On the Road Again came from.
Oh, that's spectacular to learn, Fito. I mean, and going up the country, that was
going up the country is a different story. That
yes.
came a little bit later. That was about a year
later. Right.
We already had a hit record. On the Road Again broke by itself in Dallas, Texas, and then it went all over the place, all over the world. One time we're sitting in a rehearsal and Alan Wilson shows up with this piece of paper and he starts going, jaga, 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 going up the country, baby, don't you want to go, baby, don't you? And starts reading these lyrics that he wrote. Those are his original lyrics, of course. You know, he made a complete lyric. But the arrangement, the musical arrangement, he got it from Henry Thomas. The Texan blues player. He was a one-man band, Henry Thomas, and he did a song called "Going Down South," which has that music and has the little flute part. You know, the fantastic little flute. But he changed all the lyrics. That's why he was able to claim it as original. I mean, there are people that say that we copied and this and that, but that's not true. We did get inspired by the music of Henry Thomas.
Yeah.
But Alan wrote his own lyrics.
Yeah.
And his own lyrics are great.
Yes.
I mean, going up the country, baby, don't you want to go? I mean, that's how good do you want it? You know?
I know.
So that's when Alan is playing this little lick on the guitar and singing it to us, Larry and I. Those are the three guys that play in that song.
Yeah.
And Larry turns to me and looks at me and says, "That's going to be a hit record. There's no question about it."
Oh, God.
We knew it right up front. And you're talking about a band that really didn't care about having hit records or being famous. But now we were in the pop world. A world that we really didn't even understand. But we were there because we were able to marry country blues with rock and roll.
Exactly. And what's also interesting, Fito, is the sound of Alan's voice. The falsetto is unimaginably familiar now to millions of us who love rock and roll. And that is very interesting, though, that was a falsetto decision by him to do those songs with that, "I'm coming home." You know, that isn't that interesting?
Yeah. Most of the songs he recorded, he did that sound of voice.
Right.
That was his voice. I don't even think he was in falsetto. I think they call it really falsetto. It's like he's using his original voice, but he's using that tone, that high tone. And he was a wonderful man and very, very, very talented. He was a genius. Too bad he left us so soon and such a young age.
Yes, and a tough way for sure. In '69, though, here you go. This place behind me, which before you see all these people, it's 600 acres of grass. And, Max says, just farm, and boom, this happened. Fito, it is an honor to talk to somebody who played here. And not only did you guys play here, you became a staple of this concert. In my eyes, before I knew I was even going to interview you, I've known this for 40 years of being a rock and roll fan. Or more, that you guys were instrumental to making this as special as it was. Give me a couple of anecdotes about your experience at this place in Bethel, New York for Woodstock.
Okay, well, there are several anecdotes.
I bet.
Actually, I cover the whole experience from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to sleep that night. I covered it in my book.
Because, in Living the Blues,
of course, this is Yeah, this is the question that most people ask me. Tell us about your Woodstock experience.
That's why I'm asking. Yeah, why don't you give me if you can, one or two of your most dynamic moments at that place?
Yeah, well, we cannot cover with the time we have now.
Right,
the whole day.
That's why they need to read the book.
Yeah. That's why you have to read the book. But I gotta say, for example, I didn't want to go to Woodstock. I didn't know what Woodstock was and what was all about. And I was actually physically forced out of the room by my manager. He comes to my room and says, turn the radio on, turn the TV on. This is going to be the biggest gig you've ever played. I was tired. We were a little bit pissed off. We had just lost Henry Vestine had just quit the band.
Right.
And we just hired Harvey Mandel. Without rehearsals, we went and played the Fillmore East. And then Woodstock that weekend, you see, the weekend following. And so I was not really that into it that day, but he convinced me, he dragged me physically out of the bed, put your t-shirt on, Levi's t-shirt, bag of drumsticks with a little towel and a couple of joints. And that was it.
Right. That's all you need to go up there to that. That's unbelievable.
Okay, so we end up in White Hills, New York, in a little airport there. Again, the attitude is like we don't feel really good. We are tired. We're hangover from the gig before. We didn't get too much sleep. Anyway, so this helicopter shows up and it says press on it. And we see these two kids running with their cameras and their recordings towards the helicopter. So we went after them. And they are already inside the helicopter when Bob Hyde, 300-pound Bob Hyde, goes into the helicopter and says, where do you think you are going? And the kids, they were young guys. We were young too, but they were as young as we are. They go, we're going to report the news. So Bob grabs the kid and pulls him out of the helicopter physically. And they'll say, no, you're not. We are going to make the news.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
So we took the two kids out of the helicopter, we dragged and we took over and we actually hijacked the helicopter from the press because there was no other way to get there, and we had to do it. I mean, they were not going to mess with us. The helicopter pilot was there to do whatever necessary.
Right.
And the two kids from the press. It was only two of them.
Sure.
And it was five of us.
Yeah, you're a band. You're a band that's supposed to play at Woodstock. You need to get there. And
I know five dangerous looking hippies. You didn't want to mess with them.
I know. I've seen the pictures of you guys back then more than ever researching this, and I'm like, they were wild. But how did you?
Right. So then once we're in the helicopter, this is another one. I see what you have there in the background.
Oh, unbelievable.
I see that multitude of people. I can't believe it. I said, I talked to myself. This is the gig I was not going to play. This is the gig I didn't want to come to. My God, this is the greatest gig ever. And as we're looking at that, my manager, Skip, grabs his Pentax. I don't know if you remember the Pentax cameras they used to have. Really good. He grabs his Pentax out of the window of the helicopter and starts shooting. Starts shooting all kinds of shots. One of those great shots actually ended up in Ravi Shankar's Woodstock album.
Oh my God!
If you see Ravi Shankar's Woodstock album, you open it up and you see the Woodstock picture similar to the one you have behind.
Right.
That was taken by my manager, Skip Taylor, from the helicopter.
Oh, that is it. There wasn't ever an expectation that Skip would get a picture like that published, but what an amazing moment that had to be in general for you guys. And where did you land? Did you land over here?
I don't know. Right there in the area next to the stage.
Yeah,
that was really the only area where you could land.
Right.
And amazingly, we found at the same time we were landing, we see our truck with our roadies also arriving right next to the stage. They had left the night before, 13 hours before or 12 hours before.
Right.
Normally from New York to the Woodstock site will take you maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours. but not like that, because all the cars were blockading the road. So the roadies, somehow they made it through, pushing cars out of the road, asking the fans to help them. And they drove 12 hours from 3 in the morning the night before to 3:30, 4 p.m. to arrive right next to the stage. It was amazing. That's why I always say the roadies never get recognition, but I always give it to them. They are the infantry of rock and roll. You know, you never know. I mean, they never talk about the roadies. I never give them consideration. I always say, what would we do without roadies? What would I do as a drummer without roadies?
Totally. I mean, absolutely.
Even in Mexico, I used to have this big Indian guy that used to carry all the drums somehow with belts on himself, you know, like the Indians carry the stuff on their heads.
Sure.
That was my roadie in Mexico. I always had a roadie. I couldn't carry my drums and play them and break them down and all that. So I always call them the infantry of rock and roll. It's like the Gunga Din book of Rudyard Kipling.
Right.
The guy that saved the British Army, you remember, from the attack by giving the news.
Yes.
And that's the guy that nobody ever cared for. And he's the one that saved the British Army. The same with our roadies. In Woodstock, many bands didn't have their equipment. It was the chaotic situation. And these roadies somehow, as I said, they drove 12 hours or more, and they showed up right at the same time we were landing on the helicopter.
Oh, and that's why when you said, Fito, that there was a truck with roadies that pulled up, I'm like, pulled up? The road was dead. Nobody could go, and they made it. Wow. I mean, that must have.
They made it. That was an amazing thing. Yes.
How long was it when you arrived, before you were due to take the stage?
Well, see, as I said, many of the bands didn't have their equipment. They were borrowing equipment from other people. It was very chaotic, but we had our equipment. So it was very soon since we arrived. We arrived around 4 o'clock or so. By the time the sun was starting to set down, Skip Taylor came and says, "This is the best time to perform." And he was right. We've tried it many times outdoors. When you play in an outdoor show, when the sun is starting to go down, it's always the best time to perform. And since we have all our equipment, we were ready and we went ahead. Of course, we were headlining that night. You know, that Saturday, we were the headlining act.
Right.
And we went on, and we were following the incredible string band, which was quite a good band.
Yeah.
But they were not really for Woodstock. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, Woodstock was a little rowdier. Most of the people were like, okay, you know, this is a nice English band. You know, they play all this traditional English music and all that.
Sure.
It is wonderful. It is wonderful, but it is not the boogie. Oh. And I'm telling you, when we went on after the incredible string band, and we just hit him with all those songs, and then we play Going Up the Country, and we play the boogie and all that, the ovation was something unforgettable. I mean, you can still hear the ovation after the Woodstock boogie.
Right.
Of all the people. I mean, they just got up, and we got them up. We got them rolling.
Well, and
we got them to boogie.
And Fito, you've played a lot of live gigs, but that being up, walking onto that stage right here and looking at that immense, just endless seep of people must have been a mind blower to you guys, at least in some way.
It was a fantastic experience, and I'll be extremely forever grateful that I was part of it.
Oh, I'm so glad, Fito. Well, for the people that are sitting on here on Living on Music and with this wonderful conversation with Fito de la Parra, here you go, you guys. Here is a cross section from Woodstock, 3 different pieces of 3 songs. You have Going Up the Country, On the Road Again, and Woodstock Boogie. Here's a little of Woodstock and Canned Heat.
Ladies and gentlemen, Canned Heat.
so tired of crying, but I'm out on the road again. Well, I ain't got no woman just to call my special friend. Oh, the first time I traveled out in the rain and snow. Well, the first time I traveled out in the rain and snow. I didn't have no main road, not even no place to go. Well, I love my baby, wanna tell what I'm talking about. Well, I love my baby, tell you what I'm talking about. The next time I see you, baby, gonna make me lose my mind. Oh, tell me pretty baby, won't you tell me what's on your mind? Tell me pretty baby, tell me what's on your mind. You've been born to treat me not so. Well, the little red rooster told the little blonde hen, meet you at the bar about 10:30, sing a let's do the boogie, sing a let's do the boogie. Come on, baby, do the boogie, Lord, we'll do it all night long. Well, the little brown hen told the little red rooster, you to come around here, daddy, like you used to, got to rock the night, baby. You got to rock the night, baby. You got to rock the night, child. Lord, you gotta have some fun. Well, I had a little dog, Lord, his name was Paul. Get a little taste, Lord, he wanted all, Lord. Too much boogie. I said too much boogie. Well, too much boogie, you know it's really good for you. Hey, where did you stay last night? Hey, child, where did you stay last night? Well, you didn't come home.
Well, Fito, what an honor to be sitting here with you and watching those clips, because that concert to me, I was 8 years old, and I became a rock and roll fan probably within the next 2 years. And at 61, I'm a massive fan. That was such an amazing thing to see, and now to have you here, your energy on stage, everybody seemed like you guys seemed in. Did you come off the stage that day saying, "We did it, we did it, we did it well"?
Yes, it was very intense. And we also have to mention the PA system, the way they set it up. They didn't really use separate monitors. They used two side fields, and that's how we could hear ourselves.
Oh,
So it was not like modern times, like now that they have like 100 microphones all over the drums and everywhere.
oh, totally. Yeah.
We had like maybe 3 microphones on the drums and miking the equipment and all that. But the way they set up the sound system was amazing. It was great. It was still primitive, but it was very powerful, and it came across really good. So one of the things that you can see on us is that we're throwing all this energy, all this youth energy. You know, we were young, we were energetic, and we're trying to play as hard as possible with as much soul as possible to try to reach the 500,000 people there, you know? And so that's why you see this effort. That's why you see this effort on all of us. Larry Taylor bouncing all over the stage. Bob Hyde too. There's a part in the film where you can see his foot pressing the plywood, and the plywood goes down. Moving. You know, the big fat guy there being in the. I don't know if that's part of the footage that you played, but
it might be. It might be now. You know, I mean, I can run it while we're talking if I can find it. Oh my!
So that was part of the energy that we had. I mean, we were at the biggest festival ever, and we wanted to play as good as we could.
And so when your performance was over, when did you leave that? Did you leave soon? Did you stay somewhere? I mean, where are you gonna stay?
There is another outlaw story of Canned Heat. There we go.
Yay! I'd love to hear it.
We finished playing, and there was no way to get out of there, but there was a limousine there with the keys in backstage. So there we go again. Skip Taylor says, if you guys want to get out of here, we better jump on that limousine and take it, because there's not going to be any other way. The helicopters are gone, and the roadies are in the truck, and they are crashed. You know, they didn't sleep the night before. They drove for 12 hours. And so we went into the limousine, and we jumped on the limousine. As we are driving out, Felix Pappalardi from Mountain, the bass player from Mountain.
Right. Oh my God.
Yeah, that's Felix. Yeah, Felix Pappalardi. Yeah. He sees us. Hey, you guys, take me with you. We open the door of the limousine. He jumps on the limousine with us, and we take off.
Oh my God.
So we end up in another little town very close to it. I guess, I don't know if it was the Woodstock town or White Kills again.
Right.
We go to this hotel. You're going to like this one. We go to this hotel and we say, so you have, where are your reservations? Where the Canned Heat band? You know, one of the guys says, and the woman, I mean, there's all these people there, all these kids, all these hippies outside in the hallways of the hotel and outside in the streets, everywhere, you know.
Right.
And the woman says, no, we don't have any reservations for you here, but we have reservations for a band called Big Brother and the Holding Company. So Henry goes out there and says, we are Big Brother and the Holding Company.
Without Janice, but we're Big Brother and the Holding Company.
They didn't know. In those times, those people
in the
hotel, they didn't know
clearly
who anybody was. So we actually told them we were Big Brother and the Holding Company, and they gave us their rooms. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to them later. They maybe showed up later and they didn't have rooms because the outlaw guys from Canned Heat have taken up their rooms.
That is phenomenal.
So there you go.
Oh, what a wonderful.
We hijacked a helicopter. We hijacked a limousine to get out, and we rip off Big Brother and the Holding Company's rooms.
Well, and Fito, you guys did one of the best sets ever. I know they took it out of the movie because Warner Brothers decided not to add two of the bands in the movie. Because...
Yeah. Wasn't that something real shitty to do?
I
mean, that's just the typical corporation bullshit.
What
corporation?
Yeah, absolutely.
They wanted to play the movie 4 times a day instead of 3 times. So they decided to cut all the acts that were not Warner Brother acts. They cut Paul Butterfield out. Yeah. They cut Janis Joplin out. They cut Canned Heat out. They cut many other very important artists out.
Right.
Just to pretend the movie. The director of the movie was furious about it, and that's why later on he came out with a director's copy.
Oh yes, and included
which you can buy now, and the director's copy has the movie the way he envisioned the movie and not the way the bean counters of MGM did.
No, and I love the way they did in the documentary. They have going up the country during a lot of the naked swimming and all the images. So you guys were actually a part of the movie, not only in the playing live, but also you became, and as I said in my open that I did earlier, you became such a central part of that experience, Fito.
Well, well, the song Going Up the Country became the theme for the festival.
Yes.
It's going up the country. That's why when people come and ask me sometimes, why don't you do that song Going Down the Country? And I tell them, no. It is not going down the country, it's going up the country, because they are going from New York to the Catskill Mountains.
Oh,
that's the trip. Going up the country, going up to Max Yarsger's farm.
Yes.
That's the thing.
Absolutely.
Going up.
My first television job in the early 80s was right in that area in the Catskills, and Woodstock, Bethel was not very far away. And we went up, and we've been up there to the empty part. We weren't there.
So you went up the country.
We went up, and I bet I play, you know what, I'm telling you, I bet I played your song on the way up, to that day. Fast forwarding, again, just an incredible run with this band. You've done amazing things. One thing I wanted to hit real quick, so I don't keep you for 17 hours talking about this, because I love every second of what we're doing, is that you again have had your opportunity through, your love of the blues was the impetus for this, but you've became a kind of a person who people looked at as a wonderful drummer of this blues rock type. You played with John Lee Hooker, right? Sunnyland Slim, Clarence Brown. You did some amazing collaborations with some of the great blues people. That must have felt really good over these years, and you're still doing it. We played Cadillac Jack, and you guys are a blues band. So how does the blues must still be just churning in your heart forever, Fito?
I love it. I since the moment I turned my back on pop music, in Mexico City, I was enjoying a lot of popularity and fame and all that with Los Hooligans and Los Sinners. They had gold records, and they were extremely popular. But once I discovered blues music and this primal thing about it,
right,
that all this other music don't have, this soulful thing. And I could never go back to the pop scene.
No.
I had to stay with the blues, and of course being with the Canned Heat and with these other guys that were musicologists and blues collectors.
Right.
We were able to manage to meet some of the important blues performers that we admire, and we were able to help some of them, including John Lee Hooker and Albert Collins, for example. We met Albert Collins in Houston, Texas.
Right.
He was playing in a little club with 10 tables called the Ponderosa Club. And, we go to Albert and tell him, Albert, we love your music. You're a great guitar player. Let us bring you to LA. And we did it. We brought Albert to Los Angeles. We introduced him with Al Bennett, the president of Liberty Records. And he got his second win in his career, got a couple of great records made, and became very famous later on, before he died.
Right.
So we've done stuff like that, and we're very happy to do it. And when we did our record with John Lee Hooker, the same thing happened. We were arriving in Portland, Oregon at the airport, and we see this black guy pushing his guitar out of the carousel, for the equipment, the luggage, and we all of a sudden recognize him and say, my God, that's John Lee Hooker. So we ran towards him. We were the groupies this time.
Right. Yeah.
We were totally the groupies this time. We go, John, we're the Canned Heat band. We want to shake your hand. We love your music. We admire you so much. And he goes, you are the Canned Heats. He says, I like the way you boys boogie.
Oh,
so he knew about us already.
Oh,
he knew about us already.
This
is around 1967, 68. I like the way you boys boogie. He
says.
And that's when we shook hands with him and decided to make a record together. And after the record company's negotiations and all that, the record became a great record, the Hooker and Heat record.
Oh, spectacular. You know what I love hearing, Fito, about that? Not only your collaboration with John Lee Hooker, but what you guys did to, again, give those guys some of the gratitude and the embellishment that they deserved. So that's like Bonnie Raitt and Clapton and people that said, all right, we're playing those blues, but we want, like the Stones, their first press conference when they came here, people were like, what's your name of the band? And they're like, you don't know, it's John Lee Hooker's song Rolling Stone. So they said, we're not going to do anything until you get them on our show with us. I love that you guys did that to these guys. We have a clip right now. It's 4 years after Woodstock. It's live at Montreux in '73, and I love this because it shows some of that meshing between the blues and Canned Heat. Here's a little bit of Clarence Gatemouth Brown. That must have been
Clarence Gatemouth Brown.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that was another one of the great ones. Yeah, we did a record with him too, and we did a record with Memphis Slim too, in that same era.
Well, that's fabulous. Here's a little of Clarence Gatemouth and Canned Heat. Yeah, that shows it, Fito. It shows the collaboration between you guys on stage. You did it in the studio with the blues. Congratulations. And it keeps your heart going as a blues man, as well as some of these guys who deserve the recognition. You had a guy join in '81, Walter Trout. And he was a hell of a guitar player, only lasted 3 years. He had a lot of things that demons in him, but he's an amazing, I interviewed him once. What was the experience with Walter being with Canned Heat for a while?
Walter is a very, very good friend of mine, and I'm very happy that he has made a great career for himself.
Yes.
One thing about Canned Heat, we have had some of the greatest guitar players in the times, you know, and I can mention, like, starting with Henry Vestine, then Harvey Mandel, then Junior Watson, then Walter Trout, then Hollywood's Fats, you know. I mean, Dallas Hodge, another one, and now we have Jimmy Vivino. I mean, these are some of the greatest guitar players around. Right. And Walter was very, very aggressive and very fast and perfect for some of the Henry Vestine type Canned Heat. You see, the Canned Heat has two styles: the Alan Wilson style, which is more soft and more mellow, and the Henry Vestine style and the Bob Hyde, which is the hardcore Canned Heat. So Walter was doing really good, and we saw him in a jazz club. Gosh, I don't remember the name. It's a famous jazz club in Orange County. Okay. And that's where we asked him to join. During these times, the band was being managed by the bikers, some Hells Angels and some others things. Bob had just died. We were through a heavy era in the band, but having Walter around, we did a couple of Australian tours, and we did really good with him. And then, you know, we stayed together for about three and a half years. Eventually, Walter ended up with John Mayall, just like Harvey and Larry ended up with John Mayall in the early '70s too. Oh, wow. So it looks like John always inherits our musicians. Right. We go back and forth.
Yeah. I'm so glad Walter.
Yeah, so Walter. That's what happened to Walter. I'm very happy that he's very popular now. He's doing well. He's traveling again. Yeah. He had a liver transplant.
Sure did.
You know, that was heavy. He was almost dying.
Yes.
And he's doing good, and I'm glad that he's doing great.
I went through hell and high water. We had a wonderful talk with him, and I interviewed him. What a sweet guy, and I'm glad he made it through. And when I remembered that he had contributed to some of your life, you are largely the last man standing from the original Canned Heat band. That has to be both a kind of a tough thing, as well as kind of an endurance of yourself and the band. You lost obviously Alan early and also Bob in '80, and then Henry and then Larry and a year ago, I guess, right? How does it feel to keep
a little more, 2 years?
2 years. How does it feel to keep this amazing legacy going, Fito? It has to be really something else.
Well, I have to look at it this way. Canned Heat more like an American institution.
Yes.
It cannot be just one man's band or another band's band. It's the band, as I said towards the end of the book, I say the band belongs to everybody. At this point, the band belongs to the fans as much as belongs to us. When Bob Hyde died, we considered dropping the band and leaving it alone because we didn't think, how are we going to do? Henry and I. Larry was playing with Tom Waits at the time.
Oh.
So Henry Vestine and I, he's the lead guitar player, I'm the drummer. And we thought, we said, well, maybe this is it. This is the end. Bob is dead and we have to drop it. But we had a contract to play in Australia, and the Australian promoter, Peter Noble, contacted me and said, find yourself another frontman and bring the band with Henry as is. And I'm sure we're going to back you. Everybody will like you. So that's when we decided, okay, we're going to have to do this Australian tour because it's been already contracted. And the promoter was very worried. He had already invested a lot of the money on promotion and advertisement, etc. So we went to Australia with the idea, if the people don't like us and if they don't show, or they throw tomatoes at us or something, then we'll drop the band and we'll stop it after the tour. But the opposite happened. And it was the amazing thing of how when Bob Hyde died, part of Bob's death, the reason of his death is that he felt so despondent of how the music was going. Live music, blues music was not welcome anymore. It was a very difficult situation. The techno scene was starting to happen. The disco music was very popular.
Right.
And Bob was devastated about it. I mentioned sometimes, too much fame is what killed Alan Wilson. Lack of fame is what killed Bob Hyde.
Oh, my.
You see? That's the way it was. So we went to Australia and the people treated us great. And there was like kind of a comeback. Already in that time, 1982, 1983, is when people started to give value to live bands again in a different way. Sort of our generation started to get a little older and they came to our shows again. So we did great in Australia. I mean, we did fantastic. So then that's how we decided to continue the band. And as I said, with the idea that it is an American institution and it belongs to the American people. And as long as we can keep recreating the Canned Heat experience on the stage, that's what matters, you know?
Yeah, and you're doing it. And congratulations on...
We're doing it, yeah.
And
we play our hit records, and we play them as close to the original as possible, you know?
Sure.
And people like it. They're still coming to see us, and we're selling out a lot of places. And it's great. It's great to be able to play still at this age.
It's fantastic, Fito. And also, 2010, you came out with what has become a critically acclaimed autobiography. It's Living the Blues, and I love this second title, Canned Heat Story of Music, Drugs, Death, Sex, and Survival. And that chronicles, you know, what was in brief the impetus behind wanting to come out with a memoir about that amazing life of Canned Heat.
That was actually my co-writers. I know them since Mexico City. They knew me. They used to come see me play. They were both great. They were journalists, professional journalists, both of them, and they both ride motorcycles. So we used to ride together, you know, every time that we rode. Whenever we take a break to eat lunch or something, they will always come to me and says, "Tell us Canned Heat stories." They always wanted to hear Canned Heat stories because we were so outrageous, right? And these guys, this couple, my two promoters, my two co-writers, they grew up in high school together and they got married and they had a normal life, a normal couple life. So to them, to hear the stories of Canned Heat, what they used to water their mouth, you know, I mean, they loved it. So that's how the idea came in one of those biker joints, you know, that you stop by to have a drink, have an iced tea or something before you ride. I told them a couple of the stories of the band, and they were just on the floor cracking up, laughing and stuff. And that's where that's where we shook hands, and we decided to make the book. The book actually was self-published in 1997. Wow. The book that you are talking about that just was published finally is 2010.
Okay.
Because I self-published it, and I only sold it on my website for a while.
Right.
The book has been translated to Spanish, to Castilian Spanish, to Mexican Spanish,
perfect,
to German, and to French.
Oh.
So it's great that the book, Story of Canned Heat, is all over the world, you know, and translations out there. And it's done really well. And not only that, I actually I signed a contract with Mike Judge.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask about next.
Mike
Judge, my gosh.
The famous director, producer. Mike read my book and he loved it because it's right up his alley. I mean, dark humor, tragedy, etc. You know, and he came to see me. We had a nice meeting here. We eventually signed a contract and an option for 5 years, but the 5 years went by, and we got interrupted 2.5 years with a COVID problem.
Oh,
and that kind of fell apart. Mike Judge was not able to come up with something tangible and come up with a script or a film, and the option expired about 6 months ago. So I'm free to sign with anybody else if anybody wants to make a movie. But I would love to have Mike Judge be the one that directs it.
Oh yeah, Beavis and Butthead. You know, come on.
Yeah, Beavis and how about Idiocracy?
King of the Hill, right? Idiocracy. Yep.
Idiocracy. Office of Space.
Sure.
That's another real good one.
Very.
So unfortunately, the option expired, and as I said, we lost 3 years in COVID, and that also affected the film industry. And that was when we were supposed to do the film about my book.
Oh yeah.
So it didn't happen. It didn't happen, and the option expired, and now I'm back to zero again. So I hope I find somebody that is interested and wants to make a movie out of that book, because I'm telling you, a lot of people that have reviewed the book, they always say, this has to be a series or a book, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, I know a lot of filmmakers and stuff, and I'm going to spread the word. I mean, they might not be Mike Judge, but they're going to be amazing people.
Hey,
look,
tell them to read the book, and then they can judge.
Well, that's what I wanted to again remind people. It's Living the Blues by Fito de la Parra. It is all over the place. You can find it. I was looking around on Amazon, and you know, there are some people who seem to want to get copies, and they're looking for copies. And it looks like it is part of the rock and roll bio atmosphere right now. I've had a number of guys on, Alan Paul, who wrote the Allman Brothers bio, and Stevie Ray Vaughan. I've had a number of people on. And this sounds like an amazing ride from an amazing guy who began with this band and has now continued 50 plus years later. Fito de la Parra, I can't thank you as a rock and roll fan. The music and journalist part's great, phenomenal. But as a rock and roll fan who grew up in the 60s and knew your band then, I thank you for really opening up and talking about this on Living on Music. Thanks so much.
Thanks to you for your interest and for keeping up the faith.
Always. And you're keeping up the legacy, and congratulations. And if I get a chance, I would love to get out to Ram's Head for this gig Monday. We have a gig and my little acoustic duo on Monday afternoon for a senior.
You should open for us.
Oh, I know.
You should have booked the gig with us and open for us.
If I'd known, that would have been phenomenal. But look, thanks so much.
We always ask for acoustic acts to open for us.
Oh my.
We always like that, because we don't like blues bands opening for us or other loud bands, because then they start kind of competing, you know, and all that. And we don't like that. So it's ideal for us to have a duet like yours to open for us.
Well, there are some incredible duos in the DC area that do a lot of original songs. We do obviously mostly covers from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. But anyway, thanks for that thought, and thanks for this talk. And we will be in touch. I can't wait to get this show done and out and let people learn a little bit more about Fito and the history of Canned Heat, and also your musical history. Thanks again, my man, for being on. You know, when I started the show 2.5 years ago, I knew I was going to interview the best musicians in this area, and I have, and it's been the greatest thrill ever, as well as interviewing people like Fito. I mean, I hope you got a chance to watch this show. Again, it's a long, living on music deep dive. I've done a whole bunch of those because I want people to be able to tell their past, their present, and their future stories. And it's been a wonderful ride. Fito de la Parra, thank you so much for being on Living on Music. I mean, you know, you fit into the roster of Carmines and Jim McCarty's and people like that have been true legends on their behind the skins, and so have you, and you still are playing. But I loved being a part of talking to you about all of this. Thanks so much. You can go to their Canned Heat site. I made it at tinyurl.com/canned heat site because it's an interesting thing. It's also in Mexican, and there's some translation issues that you can run into. It's not bad, but anyway, go there, tinyurl.com//canned heat site, and learn not only the history of these guys, but where they're playing now. And you'll hear some of the great blues that they played. They cover amazing stuff from blues. It is an amazing ride with Canned Heat. Fito de la Parra, thanks so much. Let's keep in close touch. Real quick, everybody, if you're not already, please become a member of the Living on Music Nation. Go to Facebook, and all you have to do is obviously join. You'll get, you know, a real neat overall musical library of sorts coming to you, and it won't ping you to death. It just gives you musical moments, musical images, clips, gigs of bands histories, a little of everything, sometimes little polls or questions, and also Living on Music episodes are first posted there about when they're coming, if they're coming, teasing them. Very excited for a couple coming up that I'll mention in a minute. You can also go, if you would, please go to our YouTube channel, Living on Music with Steve Houck on YouTube, trying to ratchet up the subscribers, because that's how you get a little bit more from YouTube, like custom URLs and things like that. I got to get up high. So we're increasing all the time. So please join, subscribe. And again, you'll get a little ping about a show that'll be posted, but nothing overall all the time. So please join. And also, if you're a podcast fan, Living on Music with Steve Houck is on podcasts. All the major podcasts, or most of the ones that you likely use, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google, Apple, and a bunch of the other ones. And all you have to do is search Living on Music with Steve Houck, and you will find us. And podcasts are probably the last 20 episodes are on there now. So please join us there. Coming up on Living on Music in the next few weeks, I'm still locking them in. I've locked in one, and I want to lock in the other. We have George Winston, who is one of the most incredible artists of my life, a pianist, you know, at the top, and then he also plays some wonderful harmonica. He also goes inside the piano and plays the inner parts of the piano, and also plays guitar, and an incredible guy for the last 40-50 years at least, out there in the world, being one of the most world-renowned artists of all time. And I've interviewed him twice, and I get to do it again on the show. I've interviewed him on the phone as he was driving from California to Minnesota to do a gig. We talked, and it was staggeringly wonderful. George Winston coming up on Living on Music. And also, I'm Henry the Eighth. I am Henry the... Who sang that? Right? It was Herman's Hermits. They were a big part of the 60s music. I had Sullivan. They were on a whole bunch of other things. They made some really great money with their songs. They had a kind of hush back then. Peter Noon is going to be part of Living on Music in the next few weeks. We'll let you know when the date's coming up. But being able to talk to him, he plays the Birchmere here in Virginia often, and can't wait to talk to Peter when we get that locked in about his life, his career, with Herman's Hermits, and also as an actor and a musician and a songwriter. So those are coming up on Living on Music in the next few weeks. Until then, everybody, stay safe, stay happy. Get out and support live music whenever you're able to, because they still need it as much as ever. They will welcome people coming out and helping support all the musicians that are out there playing again. And it is very, very exciting as we slowly get out of this thing. But all that, and also don't forget to always keep living on music.